Prince William couldn't hold back his tears. The royal doctor's heartbreaking diagnosis about Prince Louis shattered the palace's silence. At exactly 8:06 a.m., Catherine's emotional statement stunned the nation. No rumors, no denial, just truth, and it changed everything. What the world learned next left hearts completely broken. The moment that changed everything. At exactly 8:06 a.m., the silence inside Windsor was broken. Not by a royal aide, not by a news anchor, but by Catherine, Princess of Wales herself. The message was short, just a few carefully written lines released directly by Kensington Palace. But behind its calm phrasing, the truth landed like a hammer. Prince Louis, the youngest of the Wales children, had been diagnosed with a medical condition requiring long-term care. There were no technical terms, no dramatic language, no timeline, just truth. Gentle, raw, and impossible to ignore. Across the UK, the reaction was instant. Phones lit up at breakfast tables. Commuters on platforms froze, their screens flashing with updates. Within minutes, BBC and Sky News broke into live programming. Presenters paused between lines, their voices steadying as they delivered the unimaginable. But the public saw only the polished result. They didn't see the sleepless nights that led to it. They didn't see Catherine hunched over multiple drafts, rewriting the same sentence again and again. For weeks, she had wrestled with the decision, caught between the instinct to protect her child and the pressure of being one of the most visible women in the world. When William offered to make the statement on her behalf, she refused. "It has to come from me," she told him, "not as a royal, as a mother." Inside the palace, the tone shifted instantly. What had once been handled by press teams and strategy meetings became something else entirely. Personal, emotional, real. Staff, many of whom had served the family for decades, moved with visible caution. Voices lowered. Doors stayed closed longer. Outside the palace gates, people gathered. Strangers, families, parents who knew what it meant to receive news that changes everything. Some stood in silence. Others left handwritten notes tucked into the railings. There were no loud chants, no flashing lights, just a heavy quiet, the kind that only comes when something sacred is being shared. And that's exactly what Catherine had done. She had opened a door that most royals keep closed. She didn't offer promises. She didn't ask for pity. She simply asked for privacy and for compassion. And in that moment, the line between the monarchy and the people blurred. This wasn't about duty anymore. It was about parenthood. The early signs Catherine couldn't ignore. Long before the headlines, long before the announcement, there were whispers, soft and fleeting, but enough to catch a mother's attention. It began in early autumn within the comfort of routine. Prince Louis, usually bursting with energy, started slowing down. His laughter faded sooner. Playtime ended earlier. He rested more, moved less. To outsiders, it might have looked like nothing. A child having a quiet day. But Catherine noticed everything. She saw how he leaned into cushions after playing outside, how he sometimes sat instead of running. At first, she said nothing. These moments could be growing pains after all. But they lingered. They repeated. And deep down, she knew. Then came the morning that changed everything. It was a school day, like any other. The house was buzzing with coats, backpacks, and breakfast dishes. Louis, dressed and ready, paused at the bottom of the stairs. He looked up, unsure, not tired, not fussy, just still. His hand trembled slightly as he steadied himself on the rail. Catherine saw it. She knelt beside him, smoothed his jumper, gave him a kiss, and sent him on. But the moment stayed with her. She didn't wait. That same day, she asked her private secretary to bring the next round of tests forward. What followed was a stretch of weeks filled with subtle changes inside the palace. Louis's appearances were reduced. The family calendar shifted. Hospital visits were arranged with quiet precision. No flashing motorcades, no security giveaways. Catherine remained composed, but those closest to her saw the difference. A cough in the hallway could pull her from a meeting. A single message on her phone could still her completely. Even Princess Charlotte noticed. She stayed close to her brother during walks, reached for his hand, held his gaze a little longer. Within the walls of Kensington Palace, love had begun to outpace ceremony, and Catherine, though still smiling for the cameras, was bracing for something she hadn't yet dared to name. Because sometimes the body knows before the words arrive. And for this mother, every whisper was a warning, one she could no longer ignore. Inside the diagnosis, the news that shattered their world. The day the diagnosis arrived, the palace was quiet. Too quiet. Snow had begun to dust the grounds outside Kensington Palace. But inside, the frost came from something else entirely. For weeks, Catherine and William had waited, holding their breath through every appointment, every test, every visit to the private wing of the hospital. The doctors had been careful, their words measured, never confirming, never dismissing. They spoke in circles, cautious not to raise panic, but never offering comfort either. Then, in late November, it came. Not with fanfare, not with a doctor rushing down a corridor, but with a plain white envelope, hand-delivered to Catherine's private study. Inside was the final report. Printed, precise, permanent. It wasn't a terminal diagnosis. There was no talk of crisis or emergencies. But the words made one thing clear. Prince Louis's condition was lifelong. It would not pass with time. It would require ongoing monitoring, carefully managed routines, and adjustments that would change not just his childhood, but the rhythm of the entire family. Catherine didn't cry. She simply read it again, and again, and again, absorbing every line as if it might soften on the third or fourth reading. It didn't. Later that evening, Prince William returned from London. The cold still clung to his coat as he entered the sitting room. Catherine handed him the paper without a word. He read it in silence, standing by the window, his back to her. When he finally turned around, his face said everything. "We'll face this," he said, but his voice cracked. There were no formal meetings that night, no briefings or advisors, just a husband and wife sitting quietly in a room that suddenly felt too big, too cold, too far from the world they once controlled. The monarchy had survived wars, scandals, and betrayals. But this was intimate. This was theirs. William's thoughts turned to the future, to the expectations once placed on Louis, to what would now need to change: schooling, routines, public appearances. All of it had to be reconsidered, and above all, protected. Because this wasn't just a diagnosis, it was a new reality, one that redefined what it meant to be royal, not by duty, but by parenthood. Windsor lockdown. The palace goes silent. Within hours of the diagnosis, the atmosphere inside Windsor Castle shifted. Staff didn't need to be told. The change was immediate, visible in the way voices softened, footsteps slowed, and doors stayed closed a little longer. Prince Louis's name disappeared from the internal event schedules. His planned holiday appearance was removed without explanation. Those who noticed didn't ask. Those who knew said nothing. A small circle of trust was activated, not based on rank, but on discretion. Only a handful of palace officials were informed, enough to move things behind the scenes, not enough to leak details. Medical records were encrypted. Every hospital involved was contacted. Privacy protocols were elevated to their highest level. Even King Charles was informed in stages, first by phone, then through secure written briefings. His response was quiet, heavy. This was not a constitutional matter. This was a grandfather listening to news he wished he didn't have to hear. Princess Anne was among the first to arrive in person. She came early the next morning, her coat still dusted with frost. She offered no platitudes, no rehearsed sympathy, only presence. In a private room with Catherine, she placed a steady hand on her shoulder and said, "Whatever this is, you'll get through it, and so will he." Inside the palace, a new kind of coordination began, not between departments or officials, but between people. Staff who had served the royal family for years now moved with quiet urgency. Even Camilla, often strategic and careful with public image, sent Catherine a handwritten note. No protocol, no advice, just support. And then a new silence fell. This wasn't the strategic silence of the monarchy, the kind used to weather political storms. This was the silence of waiting, of knowing something heavy had landed and the world outside didn't yet know. But the clock was ticking. Rumors would start. Absences would be noticed. Photographers would whisper. Headlines would speculate. And inside that pressure cooker of legacy and privacy, William and Catherine faced the hardest choice of all: how much of the truth to share and when. William's breakdown behind closed doors. Prince William had faced pressure his entire life. Duty, legacy, the public eye. He knew how to hold composure when the world watched. But behind the palace walls, he was something else entirely: a father. And this time, he couldn't hold it together. The night after the final diagnosis came, William walked the corridors of Windsor Castle in silence. Aides saw him, but no one spoke. His face was pale, eyes red. His usual strong posture had softened, like someone who was carrying something too heavy to name. At one point, he stood outside Prince Louis's bedroom door, listening to his son sleep. His hand hovered near the doorknob, but he didn't enter. He stayed there, still, for nearly 10 minutes, just listening, just trying to breathe. Inside the family quarters, Catherine watched him quietly. She had seen William handle wars, losses, and royal crises, but she had never seen him like this, wordless, unraveling slowly. When she reached for his hand, he pulled her into a quiet hug and whispered, "I should have seen it earlier." He didn't blame her, or the doctors. He blamed himself for not acting sooner, for brushing off the signs, for believing things would be fine. But how could he have known? Louis had always been bright, playful, full of energy. That was the image the public knew. But over time, William began to replay every small moment. Every time Louis rubbed his eyes early. Every time he sat out of play with his siblings. It was all clearer now, and unbearable. Later that week, during a private moment in the palace garden, William broke down completely. No cameras, no titles, just a man in quiet grief. His shoulders shook, and for a while, he couldn't speak. Catherine sat beside him, saying nothing, just holding space for the storm he'd tried so hard to contain. They both knew the world would see him as the strong heir, the steady leader. But inside these walls, he was just a father who'd received news no father wants. The next morning, he asked his staff for one thing. No press, no leaks, give us time. But time was already slipping through their hands. Fight for privacy before the storm hit. Just when William and Catherine thought they had a moment to breathe, the storm found its way in. A hospital admin error, small, careless, unintentional, exposed a redacted medical file. It wasn't detailed. It didn't say Prince Louis, but a coded patient ID and one wrong email thread placed it where it should never have been, in front of someone who knew how to read between the lines. On November 29th, a tabloid editor reached out with a deceptively polite inquiry. "We're hearing some chatter about the youngest Wales child. Anything to comment?" That was the moment the palace froze. In Catherine's private study, the phones rang non-stop. Secure lines were opened, and aides scrambled to assess the damage. There had been no breach of diagnosis, no official leak, but the crack had formed, and rumors were already circling hungry newsrooms. The privacy they had fought so hard to preserve was slipping. William was furious but focused. He didn't want a confrontation, he wanted containment. "This isn't scandal," he told one aide. "It's our son's life." By midday, hospital officials had confirmed the source of the internal error. An IT staff member had flagged the appearance of a non-anonymized patient code connected to royal correspondence. The file was sealed immediately. Logs were pulled, staff were questioned, but the damage was done. Catherine's fear wasn't headlines. It was distortion. If they didn't speak first, the story would be twisted. Headlines would run wild. Speculation would fill the gaps. Still, she hesitated. Every version of a public statement she read felt too cold, too strategic, too royal. She didn't want strategy. She wanted protection. That night, William said something she hadn't wanted to hear. "If we wait any longer, we'll lose control of it." He wasn't wrong. The pressure outside the gates was building. And inside the palace, every hour brought more calls from reporters, pretending not to know what they knew. Catherine sat at her desk past midnight, reading one final draft. It still wasn't right. So, she took out a blank page. And she began to write. In her own words. Not as the Princess of Wales, but as a mother. And outside the palace walls, the world was waiting. The palace in crisis mode. By the next morning, the mood inside Windsor was unmistakably different. Calm had been replaced with quiet urgency. For the first time, this wasn't just a family matter. It was a full-scale royal crisis. Meetings were called immediately. The king joined from Clarence House via secure video, his voice low and tired. He had lived through scandals, tragedies, abdications, but this was different. This is a child, he said. Let's not forget that. Catherine and William sat side by side, both composed, both exhausted. The weight of protecting Louis now clashed with the brutal rhythm of public scrutiny. Advisors laid out options: full disclosure, partial release, or controlled silence. The first draft of a statement was sterile, full of medical phrases and legal buffers. Catherine read it once and pushed it aside. "That's not how I speak," she said softly. "That's not how I want to talk about my son." Anne broke the tension. She leaned forward and said, "You don't owe them clinical detail, but you do owe Louis his dignity." Everyone knew what was at stake, not just privacy, but perception. Delay the truth, and tabloids would invent their own. Say too much, and Louis's future would be haunted by headlines. Behind the scenes, palace security teams coordinated with hospital administrators. IT systems were reviewed. Access logs were locked. But no system could guarantee control anymore. Someone had already leaked just enough to start the fire. Outside, reporters had begun gathering near Kensington. No official questions yet, just hovering cameras, subtle whispers, and growing pressure. At the heart of the palace, the Waleses faced a cruel truth. The longer they waited, the less of the story they would own. Catherine looked at William. "If we speak," she said, "it has to come from us, not from the crown. From us." He nodded. The decision had been made. The night Catherine made her decision. That evening, the frost crept silently across the palace windows. Inside her private room, Catherine sat beside Louis, brushing his hair gently as he drifted into sleep. He didn't know the storm circling outside. He only asked if he still had to go to the place with the loud machines. Catherine smiled through tight lips and said, "Not today, darling." She stayed a little longer after he fell asleep. In the hallway, William waited, watching her with eyes that understood everything. The storm had reached their door, and they had no choice but to open it. Downstairs, palace aides had left 3 final drafts on the table. Polished, safe, sanitized. Catherine didn't touch them. Instead, she pulled out her own folded paper, one she had written in the early morning hours. Her handwriting, no royal seal, no grand tone, just a message from a mother. It was honest, brief, emotional without being fragile. It said Louis was undergoing ongoing medical evaluation, that the family was hopeful, that they were asking for space and kindness. William read it silently. Then he said, "It's perfect. It's real." At 9:30 a.m. the next morning, the statement went public. Within minutes, it was on every major news site in the world. Not because of what it revealed, but because of how human it felt. Catherine didn't play the royal. She didn't hide behind protocol. She stepped forward gently but firmly, with the kind of grace that couldn't be rehearsed. Princess Anne arrived quietly, offering a hand on Catherine's shoulder and a simple, steady phrase. "He will be all right, and this is the dignified way to do it." From Clarence House, King Charles responded with 6 words. "I'm proud of you, truly proud." That morning, a new respect surrounded the Wales family, not because they held power, but because they had shown restraint, strength, and love. Catherine and William didn't smile for the cameras. They didn't wave. They didn't pose. They simply stayed by their son's side, together, quiet, and unshaken by the world beyond the gates. Because now, the truth belonged to them. The nation reacts. A kingdom holds its breath. The statement was barely an hour old when the world began to respond. By 10:20 a.m., Catherine's message was already trending worldwide. But what followed wasn't chaos. It was something far more human. Outside Kensington Palace, people started to gather, quietly, respectfully. Not for spectacle, but out of care. Some brought flowers. Others left notes written in children's handwriting. "Feel better, Louis." "We love you, Prince Louis." In homes across the UK, parents stopped in their kitchens. Teachers paused lessons. News anchors fought through emotion. One Sky News presenter choked up mid-sentence and said simply, "This one hits differently." It wasn't about the crown anymore. It was about the child. There were no invasive demands, no cries for details. For once, the public didn't want more. They wanted less. They wanted the family to be left alone, to heal, to breathe, to adjust. Social media exploded, not with speculation but with support. Hashtags flooded timelines. Hashtag Stand with Lewis. #, Protect the Wales Children. We see you, Catherine. Celebrities added their voices too, not with performative posts, but with subtle messages of empathy. Quiet reposts, heart emojis. No spotlight hogging statements, just warmth. Even politicians stayed away from the moment, offering silent gestures of respect. For once, the monarchy wasn't a symbol. It was a family. Inside Windsor, Catherine and William stayed off screens. They spent the day with their children, shielding them from the news cycle. There was no celebration of sympathy, just quiet relief that they'd said the truth on their own terms. What struck the nation most wasn't how much they revealed, it was how little. And in that restraint, they earned something rare: genuine trust. The people saw the pain behind the palace gates, but they also saw strength. And in Catherine's calm, unwavering words, they saw a mother doing what mothers do, protecting her child with grace. Sirs. What happens next? A royal family forever changed. Prince Louis's life will now move on a new path, not limited, but different. His condition may never be publicly named, and it doesn't need to be. What matters is that he is loved, supported, and surrounded by a family who now live with a sharper focus than ever before. Catherine and William's roles will continue, but they will shift. Appearances will be fewer. Travel will be more calculated. Every schedule, every event, every public moment will be measured against one simple question: is this what Louis needs? And sometimes, the answer will be no. Public understanding has changed too. The monarchy isn't just robes and crowns anymore. It's a mother kneeling at a bedside, a father carrying silent guilt, a little boy with bright eyes who now walks a road lined with love and caution. Within the palace, operations are quietly adapting. Engagements will be rescheduled. Holidays will be made simpler. Even school arrangements are being revisited. It's not about hiding, it's about preserving joy. King Charles has grown quieter in meetings. His concern now stretches across 3 generations, not just for Louis, but for William, the father, the future king, now forever changed by the one role the monarchy never trains you for: being a parent in pain. Behind the grandeur, the family has closed ranks. Anne checks in often. Camilla sends messages, not instructions. The tone has softened everywhere. Louis, for now, is doing well. Some days are slower. Others are full of laughter. But what matters is that every step forward is taken with care. This diagnosis doesn't end his story. It simply rewrites the beginning. And in this new chapter, the Wales family stands closer, stronger, and more human than ever before. Because no matter what the titles say, love, not lineage, is what truly defines a royal legacy. The palace will move forward, but nothing will be the same. This isn't just royal news. It's deeply personal.